A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm. Thank you. So now we further extend the discussion into the types of soil. Now, before the break, we had taken a look into the alluvial soil and its properties. We had taken a look into black soil and its properties, and also red and yellow soil, along with the region where you find these kind of soil to be in existence. Now we come over to a kind of a soil which is infertile, which is considered to be slightly infertile. And that is because here in this type of a soil, majority of the nutrients, they are drained off and they are drained away by the events or the action of rainwater. That is your laterite soil. Now, when you talk about laterite soil, when you come across laterite soil conditions and formations, this is what they appear to look like. And overall, they have a very hardened structure. When they basically are very, very dry, they will have a very hardened structure out there. And due to that hardened structure, they give you a stony brick-like appearance. And hence the name laterite. Because later, in terms of when we talk about latter, so just a moment. Okay. So when we talk about latter, so here it is a Latin word whose meaning comes out to be brick. Okay, so that is the meaning of it. From that, the term laterite has been derived from. And this soil is significantly used for brick making and other commercial purposes. That is the chief utility of this. Now, here what happens, generally to be found in areas where you have wet and dry conditions also. So substantial amount of dry conditions following those wet conditions. So here what you observe is, let's suppose you have the soil in a region. Let's suppose it has got different types of nutrients. Nutrients as in various different types of components, salts, etc. Now, if there is the situation of excessive rainfall, let's suppose, sudden excessive rainfall if it occurs. Now, in that eventuality, all that water will start seeping in and they will basically be dissolving all these soil nutrients, and all that soil nutrients will then get accumulated at the bottom. Means the topsoil will be dissolved or will be devoid of any of the nutrients, and all these nutrients will get accumulated at the bottom portion. Okay, this is a process which is also referred to as the process of leaching. So this is also a process which is referred to as the process of leaching, where the rainwater will carry all the various different nutrients and accumulate it into the lower region. So you will observe here, observe this. So the top portion has been drained away and drained out of all the various nutrients, and all those nutrients and the salts, they have accumulated in the lower portion. Means the topsoil will be devoid of any kind of nutrient cover whatsoever. So it develops under tropical and subtropical climate with alternate wet and dry season. Okay. Now, when the topsoil gets devoid or drained out of the nutrients, then when the dry conditions follow, they will harden up like a stone or a brick-like structure. And that property is utilized where that topsoil of that laterite layer, that is taken away for the manufacturing of bricks. It is the result of intense leaching, here due to the causation of heavy rainfall. Now here, it is significantly poor in nitrogen, phosphate and calcium, as is the case with almost all the soil types, that you will find them to be very poor in terms of nitrogen content. Now, in certain areas, for example, in the southern part of the country, in areas such as Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, some parts of Kerala also, by adopting proper conservation methodologies to ensure that excess amount of flow of water does not take away all the nutrients, ensuring that soil erosion does not happen. So by adopting proper conservation methodologies, you have the growth of certain crops such as, for example, even tea and coffee, for example, even when you consider tapioca and so on, these kind of crops are grown in the region of southern India. So after adopting appropriate soil conservation techniques, particularly in the hilly areas of Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, the soil is eventually found to be useful for growing tea and coffee. Now here, red laterite soil in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh and Kerala are more suitable for crops such as the cashew nuts. These laterite soil, they will have reddish appearance. Okay, they will also have a reddish appearance. Okay, it will have a kind of a reddish appearance. So here, it is found to be present mostly in the southern states, Western Ghat region of Maharashtra, Odisha, and some parts of West Bengal and northeastern part of the country. That is where you will find the existence and the presence of red laterite soil. Now then we come across to the arid soil. Arid means something which is almost like a desert, very dry. So in regions of very scarce rainfall, where rate of evaporation is very high, the amount of rainfall received is very, very low, but the loss of water due to evaporation is very high. So here, this is a region of moisture deficiency. Deficiency. Precipitation is low. Evaporation is very high. Okay, the rate of evaporation is very, very high. So generally they are going to exhibit a reddish to brownish color appearance. They are sandy in texture, right? They don't have that combining property. Generally when you encounter sand and you take a handful of soil in other hand, obviously there will be a difference, right? Because of very dry condition, that is when the soil particles individually, they don't stick with each other, and that is when they give you a sandy appearance. So water retention capability also becomes minimal over a period of time. And here, basically, in some areas, the salt content is very high, and the salt in certain areas is even obtained by evaporating any amount of water which is accumulated in that region. For example, in the region of Run of Kutch, you have the salt manufacturing, which is done in the process. Now, due to the dry climate, high temperature, evaporation is faster, and the soil lacks humus and moisture in general. Nitrogen is insufficient and phosphate is normal. So you have to keep in mind that nitrogen is deficient. Okay. Refilling of groundwater aquifers happen through water seepage, correct? How the nutrients will act here. So that is why in many of the regions, the groundwater also becomes very saline. The salt content in groundwater sometimes that increases, and wherever there is that channel drainage of that groundwater, in all those areas it will make the soil saline. And here when we say saline, don't always think that it will be salt, common salt, which will be present there. Even for example calcium sulfate, even for example magnesium, sodium, all these they add to the salinity of the soil, eventually leading to the increased salinity of the groundwater also. Okay. right? Now, after this, we come across the mountain soils. Now, when we talk about mountain soil, to be found in the mountainous areas and the mountainous regions. Now, just like in the mountainous areas, when we were taking a look at the vegetation, we observed that as you move from the lower end of the mountain to the upper portion or the top, the temperature and the, in the sense, the amount of precipitation as well as the temperature conditions, both of them change, right? So even the rate of weathering in all these areas, the rate of deposition in the areas from the top to the foothills, that will also end up varying quite significantly. So here you will observe that they, in the mountains, they vary in structure and texture depending on the mountainous environment where they are to be formed. So in the valley sides, you'll find loamy and silty soil deposits which get created. In upper slopes, you'll find coarse grained, larger texture. Because in upper slopes, there you don't have those many agents of nature which are acting. It is in the lower slopes where the river action will be very prominently felt over. But in upper slopes, you won't have the agents of nature to be that very active. So here you will have coarse grained soil which are to be present. In snowbound regions of Himalayas due to denudation, there the soil are acidic with low humus content, low organic content. Low organic content. Okay, because organic compounds in the or the organic matter in the mountains, they will not be found, they will not be present in significant quantity. So the amount of organic matter will anyways repeat or in anyways reduce. Okay. Now, in the lower valleys, the soils are fertile because in the lower valleys, these are the soils created due to deposits. Due to deposits. Okay. That is where you will find the lower valley soil to be fertile. Pooja, so please repeat again, leaching or self-ploughing. What do you want to understand, leaching or self-ploughing? Because both of them are very different. Self-ploughing is something that we observed under black soil condition. Leaching is something that you observe under laterite soil condition. Leaching is when you have excess amount of rainwater. What it brings is it drains all the nutrients, carries the nutrients to the lower level in the sense where the topsoil is no longer having those nutrients and is devoid of them. That is the process of leaching. Okay. Niranjan, why laterite soil found only in hilly areas? Not only found in the hilly areas. They are found in other regions also, in plateaus also. But it is in these areas where you will have, for example, in the foothills of Aravallis, you will find that a large period of dry season, which is followed by a short intermittent spell of rainfall. So that is where you will find these conditions to be very prominent. That is why. Okay. So Puja, is leaching understood? Leaching is where excessive amount of rainfall, it carries away or drains all the nutrients to the lower layers, making the topsoil devoid of nutrients. Okay. Now, then we come to the portion of soil erosion. Erosion means removal. So when we say soil erosion, that basically means the removal of the top layer of the soil. Now, how is it and why is it that the top layer of the soil will be removed? So, of what will remove that top layer of soil? It is the agents of nature, agents of denudation. For example, wind, river, glacial action, rainwater, all of that will displace or remove the top layer of the soil. Now, once the top layer of the soil is removed, then the subsoil or the lower layers, they are infertile. They don't have that many nutrients, they don't have organic compounds, and even the particle size is very different, and that is not able to support the plant growth. That is why after soil erosion in any particular area, vegetation is found to be almost absent over a period of time. Vegetation goes out of the window, it cannot grow, and the region becomes desertified over a long span of time. Because for the creation of that topsoil, it might have taken thousands of years or even millions of years. by continuous amount of degradation and denudation. That is how you would have had that thin layer of topsoil getting created. Now, generally, the topsoil can be eroded if, let's suppose, that soil is free to move, isn't it? Where if suppose there is no agent or no particular thing to bind the soil in its place. So in the absence of vegetation, so lack of vegetation, lack of vegetation. Okay. So lack of vegetation also creates that kind of a condition where the soil is free to move. And also, wherever there is a slope or any condition due to which the agent of nature can gain speed, be it the rainwater, be it the river water, be it the wind action, whenever they have speed associated, they will always be able to carry more materials with them. So, high speed of agents of nature. So, because of these factors, you have erosion which is observed. Okay. Now, the processes of soil formation and erosion, they oftentimes go on simultaneously, but the process of formation is very, very slow. So that is why when the rate of erosion increases, so that then it creates problem. Now, this rate of erosion will increase when there is lack of vegetation in an area or due to various different events. Let us take a look into that. Parshuram, the mountain soil is good for tea and coffee. Yes, it is. Generally, tea and coffee will grow in mountainous conditions only, and because of the conditions required for their growth. So that is why in the lower slopes of the or in the mid slopes of the mountains or the hills, you will find tea and coffee cultivation. Uh, Nikhil, is geography and modern history class going to be conducted simultaneously tomorrow? For some portion of time, yes. We are going to initiate the discussion for geography at around 9 itself, and we shall be completing it by 11:30. So, yes, the introduction of it for modern history, when Abhishek sir is going to tell you about what modern history is about, etc., etc. So those portions are going to coincide. But by the time that we are done with this portion of geography, you can again join the history session and you can start your studies for history. Don't worry, I won't take up or consume your time for history. Okay, is it modern history revision? I don't know about which batch this is for modern history. You can write it to IS Live, and it is the weekend batch of modern history which is going to go on. So, yes. Having said that, don't worry. We will not eat into your slated time schedule for history, so that you have full and undivided attention that you can pay to that class. Okay. Now, here, soil erosion is of various different types. For example, when we talk about, let's suppose, rainfall which happens in any area. Now, when the rainwater it starts falling, now that rainwater on the ground itself, you would have observed this, that when the rainwater falls on the ground, it creates a kind of a splash. It creates a kind of a splash where the soil in that region is completely taken away. So this is also a kind of an erosion. This is what is regarded as splash erosion. Okay. This is what is regarded as splash erosion. But over a period of time, over a larger area, so splash erosion will be observed in very small areas. But when we talk about larger areas, in the sense here, sometimes when the rainwater comes in, you will observe the image here. Here you observe a kind of a channel like structure, isn't it? It is not something which you will be able to figure it out or visual perception will be immediately available. No, It is not something that immediately you will be able to lay an eye upon it that, okay, this is the region where erosion has happened. But then, wherever you have slightest amount of gradient and not significant amount of soil which is bound in its place, in that case, excess amount of water, it will drain away the topsoil. And that creates the erosion where the topsoil in a manner of a sheet almost gets eroded. So that is what is referred to as sheet erosion. Sheet erosion. Okay, so sheet erosion basically takes place on the level lands after a heavy shower, and the soil removal is not easily noticeable, but it is harmful since it removes the finer and the more fertile layer of topsoil. Now, the next time that it will rain, next time, let's suppose again it rains very heavily. Now, water will again flow down the slope. But here, if I ask you, water will follow a path somewhere here, one, or water will follow across the same channel which has been created earlier, two. Which is the likely pathways that water will adopt? What do you think? Very good. Because already a channel has been created. Very good. So water will generally follow the pathway created by two here. So as a consequence, as a result of that, here you will come across significant channel deepening over a period of time. It will get deeper and deeper. You get the existence or the creation of rills. Those rills, they further deepen up by subsequent rainfall. Water will basically adopt this particular pathway continuously, and you will even come across the formation of gullies eventually. So that leads to creation of large gullies. Observe here. Gullies, they get created. So this is what is referred to as gully erosion. Okay, so that gully erosion is something which is common on steeper slopes. And here, with the increased amount of rainfall, these gullies significantly they get deepened. Okay, they cut the agricultural lands into small fragments and eventually make that particular landmass almost absolutely unfit for any commercial activities, agriculture, plantation, any commercial activities. That landmass won't be of much use because you will have so many crisscrossing gullies there. Where will you grow crops? Where will you bring that land under utility? So that is why it germinates or it gives rise to what is also known as badland topography. Gives rise to creation and existence of badland topography. So that is a region with large number of deep gullies or ravines, and that is called as badland topography. This is something which is very commonly observed in the Chambal area, the Chambal basin, especially in the region of Madhya Pradesh. So when you are in the area around, let's suppose, Gwalior, right? Gwalior, Morena, Bamor, in that area of northern Madhya Pradesh, northwestern Madhya Pradesh to be more precise, you will find a lot of these badland topography. Historically, that is a region which is very famous for the presence of dacoits, right? The dacoits of Chambal, they have been very, very famous or infamous rather. So it is in those regions where you have a lot of badland topography. In ever if you belong from that area, you would have witnessed it. Or in case, let's suppose you go for a train journey, train ride, or road travel from Delhi to Mumbai, or anywhere from Delhi to the southern part, you will experience, or your train journey will take you through that area where you will observe those fragmented land pieces which have been divided by the deep gullies carved out everywhere, and that ends up reducing the utility of that particular land, and that creates a kind of a badland topographical structure. Okay, now then you have stream bank. Stream bank erosion is what? Stream here refers to a river which is flowing, a river or a stream which generates a flow. That is a stream. And bank refers to the sides of the river. So when we talk about a river like this here, right? So here, as it flows, let's suppose, it will end up taking this particular portion along with it. Let's suppose there is no vegetation in that area. So as the river is moving, as the river is flowing, it will take away some amount of soil from this region. It will erode some soil from this region. So observe the image also. Here also, you will come across a situation where it appears that the river has carved out these areas. So in the absence of vegetation, when there is nothing to bind the soil in its position, that stream bank erosion is significantly observed, especially in the Himalayan region or the Himalayan rivers. When you talk about the rivers in the Indo-Gangetic plain area, majority of these rivers, due to urbanization or due to increased habitations which are increasing close to the river bank, many of the trees have been cut down. So the river banks now, they don't have the trees in majority of the areas. So that is why when the rivers, they are actually having full force of movement, when they actually speed up, they will start carving out these particular banks of the streams, and they will start eroding the structure. That is where every rainy season in eastern UP, Bihar, Bengal, even in Assam, you will observe many of the villages themselves, they are also carried away in the process of that stream bank erosion. Right? So the river basically expands its size and it brings more sediment and silt into its channel, which further leads to flooding of the river later on as well. So bank erosion is nothing but washing away from the banks of a stream or river where the soil is carried away. Then you have the wind erosion, the simplest of them all. Now, wind erosion can be carried out only when the wind has gained a considerable and a very high speed, significantly higher speed. Okay. So, whenever the wind has basically garnered or generated a very high speed, only then will you observe or experience this wind erosion. So, where is it that the wind will gain a very high speed? In semi-arid or arid areas where you don't have much of a vegetation in existence. In those areas, the wind will gain very high speed. So, generally observed in arid and semi-arid regions, where the wind speed is very high. So, in case there is a lack of vegetation, for example, even during the times when you harvest a crop and you leave the soil barren as it is, you don't plant any other crop for some duration. So, there also the topsoil is exposed. Now, when the soil gets dry, that means the particles will be free to move. So that is when you have a heavy wind movement, those particles will be carried away. So it is most likely to occur when strong winds, they blow over light textured soil that have been heavily grazed during the drought periods. Okay, so overgrazing, for example, and lack of cover cropping, lack of any vegetation will lead to it. Then we come across to soil degradation. Basically, when you observe that the topsoil has been carried away, that means the subsoil which is now exposed will no longer be able to support the vegetation in the same way as the topsoil. So the quality of soil has obviously degraded. But sometimes, even if the topsoil is present, due to factors such as water logging, poor drainage, excessive irrigation, there also the soil turns out to be saline, what is referred to as saline soil or usar soil. So, for example, in regions such as Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, the so-called um, uh, the in a way some products of Green Revolution, the poster childs of Green Revolution, in all these particular region also, over a period of time due to over irrigation, the soil has become saline. So, in a way, when the quality of the soil degrades, that is the process which is referred to as soil degradation. Okay, so soil degradation can be defined as a decline in soil fertility when the nutritional status declines and the depth of the soil goes down due to erosion. So reasons for degradation, if you think about it, reasons for degradation. For soil degradation. So here, yes, lack of vegetation leads to erosion. So soil erosion and all its causes you can bring about. Very good. Excessive use of fertilizers. Excessive use of fertilizer also makes the soil infertile. Now, here, many of the candidates also, they get confused in this. Many of the farmers also, they don't understand this to the truest extent. When you apply fertilizer significantly in a large amount, now ideally the thought process is that, okay, the soil will need fertilizer over a period of time. Why don't I give it at the same time? So when you apply it suddenly, it changes the property of the soil in terms of water retention, and also all the organic species that you find, the decomposers that you find in the soil, which is beneficial for providing the organic component in the soil. All those decomposers, they die immediately. So the soil, in a way, when you apply excessive amount of fertilizers, in a way the soil becomes infertile. Okay. Use of insecticide and pesticide, yes. Then also excessive irrigation. Okay. Then usage of chemicals like pesticides and herbicides. Inputs. Pesticides, weedicides, etc. Then after that, lack of crop rotation or crop diversification. Weedicides, basically, these are the chemicals which take care of the weeds which grow. What are weeds? The unwanted plants which will grow along with your crops, and they will basically, in a way, consume the nutrients that the crop should have. So those wild plants, they start growing significantly, whereas the crops which you are growing, their growth gets stunted. Those are weeds. So in order to kill those, you apply weedicides. And so lack of crop rotation or crop diversification, what is the meaning of it? So let's suppose you are growing the same crop cycle of rice and wheat, rice and wheat, rice and wheat, and we do know that both of them, they significantly extract the fertility out of the soil when you grow them. So in case, let's suppose you grow in between them pulses or beans or any of these leguminous crops which fix the atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, or nitrogen fixation process is carried out, there the fertility can be retained, there the fertility can be enriched. But in this case, when you grow the same crop again and again and again, it will continue to drain the fertility of the soil for a long period of time, and the soil eventually becomes infertile. That is something that you experience in the northwestern part of the country, that is Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, where the rice, wheat cycle has drained the soil of that region of its natural fertility. Okay. Then stubble burning, slash and burn farming also. Yes. Farming. All these processes, pollution, soil and land pollution, dumping of waste, dumping of waste. So all these basically end up significantly degrading the nature of the soil, quality of the soil. And when we say degrading the nature of the soil, its ability to support plant growth naturally without the addition of fertilizer and pesticides and chemicals, whether it is able to grow the plants naturally or not. Okay. Now, in many areas, for example, as I have told you, in regions such as Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, there has been a process of carrying out excessive amount of irrigation, right? Where, because when you apply too much of fertilizers, even in order to digest those fertilizers, you need to provide water also. So due to that, you have the soil which ends up becoming very saline in nature. So that is what is also a form of soil degradation. That is what is also referred to as saline soil, which is known as usar soil also. It is infertile, right? Lacks fertility. All the salts accumulate on the top surface. That is what you come across, that is what you observe. So in general, what you experience here is basically, yes, it is significantly observed in the region of Punjab. So what happens, in which areas do you experience this? Where you have, let's suppose, excess availability of water followed by a long dry condition. So for example, in the region of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, etc., those of you belonging from that area, or in general in cultivation also, you would basically come across a farming practice where what the farmers do, they dig tube wells. Now tube wells have become very common and very prominent across the farmlands, where you can extract the groundwater with the help of motorized pump and you can spray it over your farmland as per your requirement. Now electricity is also available. Almost many of the state governments, they are competing with each other to provide free electricity, and also there is a significant amount of subsidy otherwise which is provided. So as a consequence of that, what has happened is that many of them, they have got into the habit of switching on the tube wells at during night, and then they go to sleep, and then early in the morning, 4 a.m., 4:30 or 5:30 a.m., whenever they wake up, they will switch off the tube well. So throughout the night, the farmland will be flooded with water, right? And then following the next day, you will have excessive dry conditions. So what happens in that duration is what makes the soil saline. So understand this. Here, when you have this soil, let's suppose, it is different from leaching, by the way. Here, capillary action of water is into process. So it is not the case as laterite soil. So here, let's suppose you have the soil, and here you have the presence of various different salts. This is something that you can also observe at your own household level. Let's suppose if you have a backyard or a backyard garden, kitchen garden, or even flowering pots. There also you would have experienced that if you pour a glass of water, that water is easily digested by the soil. But if you pour a jug of water in that small area, you will observe that not only does the water accumulate, on that water you have a whitish line which starts appearing. And when that water evaporates, it leaves behind that whitish layer on top of the topsoil. So that is the salt which gets accumulated. So what happens is, let's suppose here you have the various salts. Now you up over irrigation is carried out. You apply excessive amount of water, let's suppose. Now all that water will seep down, in the sense it will dissolve all the salts, isn't it? It will dissolve all the salts. Now, in the soil also, you will have various different channels for flow of water. Now, after that, let's suppose the next day morning, when the sun is shining back again. Now, when the sun is shining back again, in that case, all that water which was dissolved, all that water which had dissolved these salts, all these dissolved components, they start rising back up through those channels. And when the water evaporates, it leaves that salt on the surface. So when that water evaporates, it will leave that salt layer on the surface. So this is your layer of salt left behind as water evaporates. Now, when that layer of salt has been left behind, now in that case, the soil becomes very hard, because when that salt gets solidified, it becomes a harder surface. So after that, the penetration of air, moisture, etc. into the lower regions of the soil, that is something which is not possible anymore. So that is why after that, you'll find that the soil becomes very poor in terms of its fertility and maintenance of fertility for that matter. So it contains a larger proportion of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and thus they are infertile and they do not support any vegetative growth. Even in areas where you don't have proper drainage, water drainage, there also waterlogging will create these conditions. Okay. Oftentimes, what also happens that when you have a lot of accumulated water on surface and you have the various different drainage channels in the soil, so there also the lower level of nutrients, etc., along with the water in the lower region of the soil, that is attracted by the capillary action. Capillary action, you would have observed that, for example, if in your childhood days you would have seen that in your science books in your class 6th or class 5th level, where if you have a liquid and on top of that if you put a test tube, then what the liquid rises up in the test tube or in that capillary, that is something which is referred to as capillary action. Similarly, when you have a lot of salts and some amount of water present in the soil, on top of that if you put in more water, so that capillary action is induced and that will bring those salts on the surface and the water is evaporated, leaving the salts on the surface, creating the saline soil. Now, in this condition, when the soil becomes saline, generally you add something which will improve the texture of the soil. So, what will improve the texture? So, what will happen if you improve the texture? Water retention and air retention capacity will improve. So that is why in these areas of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, in many of these areas nowadays, powdered gypsum is added in the saline soil as a cure, as a kind of a procedure which will help get rid of that condition of salinity. So regions in arid and semi-arid areas and in waterlogged and swampy areas also. So areas of intensive cultivation with excessive use of irrigation, especially in areas of green revolution, fertile alluvial soil are becoming saline. Farmers are advised to add gypsum to improve the texture and water retention capability of the soil. Okay. That is why you tend to add gypsum to it. Now, then this is also basically nothing but a form of soil degradation. Then eventually you come across what is referred to as desertification. So when we talk about, and Justin, is there any reforms to tackle this problem? Justin, one of the ways that the governments have tried over a past period, few years rather, if you will consider, one is to instigate and instill and also urge the farmers, advise the farmers, encourage the farmers that don't go for flood irrigation, where you simply flood the farmland. Go for sprinkler or a drip irrigation, where you apply small amount of water as is required by the plants directly to the roots, so that excessive water wastage does not happen. That is one methodology. Second is, you change the cultivation practices, where you don't need to grow those crops such as sugarcane and rice in those areas of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, where already there is moisture deficiency. There, you should be growing those particular crops which don't require that much amount of moisture, right? So crop diversification is another thing that the governments have tried, but then because of the practice of minimum selling price, etc., that is why that has not fully been achieved, and that is why you still find people in that area growing the same rice wheat cycle and further exacerbating the problem. Okay. And Nikhil, but adding gypsum is a remedial measure which will eventually lose its effectiveness if farming practices don't improve. Absolutely to the point. So we need to go for sustainability in terms of agriculture. Otherwise, this will never end up improving the or having any kind of change on the ground level. Does stubble burning increase or decrease for soil fertility? So, Kola, see, multiple things happen. So when you have, it is not a black and white situation. So try to understand this. When you burn that stubble, basically the positive aspects first. You get rid of the stubble also. Now on the ground, you have many of the pests, insects, etc., like rats, rodents, which are not beneficial for the crops. They will consume the crops. So when you burn the farmland, there all of them are taken care of. In that condition, all these rodents, pests, etc., they automatically they die, right? So that is one of the processes or benefits of it. But the ill effect of it is, it makes the topsoil so very dry that cracks open up, large cracks open up, and the topsoil, it becomes so very dry that if immediately it is not planted with, again, if immediately not brought under cultivation, soil erosion will also be very common. So in a way, it can lead to degradation also. Okay, right? I hope that is understood. Right, now we come to the process of desertification. What is desertification? So desertification for a long period of time was understood to be simply the expansion of the existing desert lands. Okay, for a long period of time, it was understood to be expansion of existing deserts. So, for example, when we consider the region of Thar Desert, let's suppose. Now, in the region of Thar Desert, you will have very strong winds. Obviously, wind action will be very strong there. So, they will end up carrying the desert sand, and they will deposit that sand into other areas of vegetation. So, dust storms, etc., will become very common. Now, let's suppose if you consider a land where you have growth of crops or any kind of plant, that is something that you are growing, let's suppose. Now, on top of that, if a lot of sand gets deposited, what will happen? Sand, not soil, sand. So basically, again, the soil fertility will be impacted, the growth of the plant will be impacted, and eventually the plant might die. So that region will also get converted into desert. So the expansion of the existing deserts into the surrounding areas, that is also referred to as desertification. Okay, into surrounding areas. For example, Thar Desert overall is expanding in the eastern part also, in the western part also, in the northern part also. And that is why regions in the adjoining areas of Haryana and Madhya Pradesh, now even Delhi for that matter, Delhi NCR, frequently you would observe that there is increased amount of dust storm and such events which are happening, especially during the time or during the months of summer. Right, you will find a lot of dust storms to get created, and these dust storms they deposit large amount of sand, creating newer areas of barren conditions. Aravalis, for that matter, have formed a kind of a barrier to prevent the expansion of the Thar Desert into the eastern portion. Otherwise, many areas of eastern Rajasthan, even Delhi, etc., would have readily become a desert. But Aravalis are a barrier because Aravalis they receive rainfall. So that is a kind of a green wall of sorts which exists, right? And that prevents the expansion of deserts. But what have we done over the past almost couple of decades or so? In Delhi NCR and in also regions of Haryana, even Madhya Pradesh, the demand for construction is very high. More people are coming in, more houses are being built. Demand for construction is very, very high. Now, where do you get these materials for construction? That is where the contractors, what they do, despite the government regulations and the warnings of the courts and all this, the mining mafias, they have a very good and well connected nexus with the people in power, regardless of whosoever is in power. So they start with the digging of the Aravali's. Rajasthan has suffered significantly because of it. So they start collecting building materials by digging the Aravali's. So due to that, the Aravali's themselves, one hill after another, is getting removed from the surface by these mining mafias. Now, for them, the point of view is that I need to earn, I need to make money. What happens if I take three or four hills out of the picture? These are the Aravali hills which extend all the way to the in the entirety of Rajasthan. But if you remove them, even a small amount of them, that means now that desertification can spread over to the plain areas where it can be absolutely irreversible in the long run. That is why it is so dangerous. That is why Supreme Court in its various judgments and rulings has given the condition, has given the directive to the Rajasthan government, to the Haryana government, not so much to the Haryana government, but Rajasthan primarily, to prevent the mining of the Aravalis. But that is something which we have still not achieved, and that is why the desertification is increasing. Okay, so this is a major problem, and Aravalis they serve as a green wall because all across the region of Aravalis, yes, Aravalis they don't cause lot amount of rainfall in the surrounding areas, but within the Aravali ranges themselves, that is a green patch because of orographic conditions created. But then if you remove them, you are left with nothing. Okay, so this is, but lately what has been found to be present in many portions of the world and more prominently in India also, that even soil degradation is eventually turning into desertification. For example, regions of Punjab, few of the regions in southern Punjab, they are turning out to be desertified because of excessive soil degradation. So that is also another form of desertification. So soil degradation can also lead to desertification. Okay. Now here, the process is very simple. Soil erosion leading to degradation, I don't think I'll have to explain it, but nonetheless, I'll go through it. When we talk about soil degradation, there, the quality of soil has reduced, whether due to excessive irrigation, excessive application of fertilizer, erosion of soil, by any of the reasons. Soil degradation means the quality of soil has basically deteriorated quite significantly. Now that means its ability to support vegetation has gone out of the window. That means in that region you won't have any vegetation growing naturally. That is desertified. Okay, so it reduces the fertility of the soil or the quality of soil, ability to support vegetation, is not present, then after that region becomes desertified. Okay, so that is how you have desertification, which keeps on happening. Now, in many regions such as Africa, there also the expansion of the existing deserts are happening. And UN has set up a body, that is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, which was set up way back in this convention and was set up way back in 1992 itself. It holds periodic meetings of the apex members or the top members and the top functionaries of these countries in the form of conference of parties. Now there also they have devised various methodologies to combat desertification, to combat degradation of the land. And in Africa, as you would be aware, to stop the spread of the Sahara Desert, there has been an initiative to build a green wall. Green wall is when you grow hedges and trees almost in a linear manner, so that that sand does not get eroded and spread and distributed into the other areas. So that is something that you will experience. So that is desertification. Okay. Um, Gaurav, in villages, so you have to question, so why farmers burn stubble since machines to harvest stubble is provided? In case of small farmers, they don't have those accessibility to those machines, and still at the ground level, not that provision is not there for entirety of the farmers. So that is why they burn it off in order to get the farmland readied before they plant the rabi crop of wheat. Okay, that is why you won't find stubble burning in southern part of the country. In southern India, stubble burning is not carried out. Why? Because in southern India, the climate doesn't change very drastically from October to November onwards. The climate is almost consistent. So you grow rice in October also, and then after November and December rains, again you grow next batch of rice. So there is no rush. But in northern part of the country, especially northwestern part of the country, immediately it is going to become very cold within the next couple of weeks. So that is why you need to sow your or plant your wheat crop before that. So because of that short window which is available for readying your farmland, the poorer farmers, the rich ones or the well-off ones, they have the availability of the machines which they can deploy and get rid of that stubble. But the poorer farmers on the ground, they don't have that availability, and they cannot deploy manual labor because it is very, very costly. That is why they end up burning it up. Okay, this is a practice which you observe in Pakistan also, because there also the same climatic conditions are experienced. So there also they carry it out. So over a period of time, it causes a lot of pollution also, as you would have experienced. Then in villages adjacent to Aravali has presence of yellow soil. Now, that you will find in the region around Aravali is also the presence of laterite soil. So in many of the regions, that laterite soil is what appears yellowish. But in some areas, you do have the presence of yellow soil. That is because of the hydrated condition of red soil. Aravali's, I hope you are aware, is a region of significant amount of iron deposits also. In the area in the vicinity of Aravali's, you have iron, which is naturally found in the rocks in that area. So, as a consequence of that, because it is an old structure, so you have iron rich rocks. Now, there, because of periodic rainfall right at the foothills of Aravallis, you have conversion of that red soil into yellow soil. But otherwise, in majority of the region around Aravallis, you will find the presence of and the formation of laterite soil. Okay. I hope, Gaurav, both the questions are understood. Now we come to the process of soil conservation, or how to conserve the soil. So when we say soil conservation, we basically are talking about preserving the quality, integrity of the soil. Now, if you think about it, once you know the problems, automatically you have the capability to provide the solutions also. So once you know the problem, that why that degradation is happening, the degradation is happening either due to soil erosion. Why soil erosion is happening? There is nothing binding the soil in its place, and agent of nature moves with such a great velocity, it carries everything along with it. So in order to prevent that, in order to conserve the soil, what do you need to do? You need to, in a way, take care of these measures. For example, never leave the topsoil barren, never leave the topsoil exposed. Agriculturalists basically talk about it that leaving the topsoil exposed is like leaving a wound exposed on your body. When you get a cut in your body, you don't leave it exposed, do you? You cover it up with a band-aid, etc. A large cut I'm talking about. Now, why do you cover it up? Otherwise, it gets infested with wounds, etc. It gets exposed to the outside environment and it deteriorates from there onwards. Similarly, the topsoil also, when it is exposed to the outside environment, excessive heating will lead to the compaction of the soil. It will harden. It will develop such deep cracks. Slowly and steadily, it will develop that sandy texture. And when you move around that soil, or winds will blow around that soil, dust will be emanated. Lot of dust gets in circulation also, right? Soil erosion will happen. So never leave the topsoil barren. Even after you have harvested the land, cover it with any kind of crop, not necessarily the cash crop, any kind of crop that will cover the topsoil. That is referred to as cover cropping, right? So you have to do that. Ensure that you go for organic farming in many of the cases, so that the chemical fertilizers are not applied to that extent. Also, you can ensure you go for simultaneous growth of, let's suppose, leguminous plants like pulses, peas, grams, right? Beans. These are naturally those plants which fix the atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, recharging the soil fertility. Go for crop diversification. Then we can go for mulching. What is mulching? In the process of mulching, you cover the farmland with a mulch, or a layer of, when we talk about mulching, you cover it with a layer of dried leaves or straws, etc. Again, the purpose is very simple: to prevent the erosion of topsoil, to prevent the compaction of topsoil. Now, other reason why significant amount of erosion is carried out is when the agents of nature, for example running water, etc., they gain a humongous speed. So when you have some amount of slope, right? So there, if there is rainwater, now all that rainwater significantly moves down with a very high speed. And that means it will carry all the soil along with that. So you can go for terrace farming. What is also contour terracing? Contour basically refers to sinuous lines, straight lines of sort. So lineation of sorts. So here, observe how this is a terrace farming structure, where observe how across a particular slope, that slope has almost been flattened, gotten converted into terrace-like structure, so that the speed of flow will reduce. Okay, so that it doesn't flow with that accelerated speed anymore. So that is again a process which will lead to soil conservation. So it is a methodology to maintain soil fertility, prevent soil erosion and exhaustion, and improve the degraded condition of soil. Yes, grazing also leads to erosion, overgrazing. So you have to prevent that process of overgrazing also. Okay, so measures such as contour bunding. What is bunding? Bunding is building small physical barriers. Okay. So, for example, if you consider a slope like this, if you consider a slope like this, now there you will find that there are, so if the slope is left just like this, it will have heavy movement of water and movement will carry a lot of sediments. But here, let's suppose you construct some bunds, physical barriers. Okay. Now, in that case, here, let's suppose water starts to flow. Before it gains a speed, it will start accumulating here. And when the water accumulates in a region, over a period of time, it will also seep down and recharge the underground water also. But then after that, it will overflow here. But then when it starts overflowing, it will not immediately gain a very high speed. It will gain a smaller speed. And then again, there is an obstruction here. So by this, by the process of contour bunding and contour terracing, we are able to reduce the speed of the water flow. And also the water stays in the same region for some time, leading to water seeping into the lower regions, recharging the groundwater level also. So by contour bunding and terracing, if you observe, okay, by these processes, contour bunding and contour terracing, reduce the speed of flow of water so that the erosional power is stopped. And then after that, water stays in the same region for a longer duration, ensuring recharge of groundwater in the area, bringing water security as well, and lack of water sufficiency in that area. So regulated forestry, again, something which will bind the soil, controlled grazing, so that overgrazing does not make the soil devoid of any or absolute every kind of vegetation. Cover cropping, where you cover it with any kind of crop that you can, but you cover it up. Mixed farming, right? And crop rotation also, mulching also you can carry out. Mulching, what it is, if I have to show you the image of it, we will cover it in the next module. When we talk about agriculture, there we will be covering it up. But just to show you the image of it here, this is mulching, where if you observe, you cover the barren soil with dried leaves, etc., dried straws, etc. So mulch is a natural or artificially spread layer of plant residues or other materials on the surface, including sometimes even biodegradable plastics, etc., so that the soil is not exposed to excessive heat, excessive rainfall, excessive cold conditions, so that the soil maintains its integrity. So, the important objective of mulching in agriculture are namely moisture conservation, temperature control, prevention of surface compaction, surface hardens and compacts when it is very, very hot, reduction of runoff and erosion. That is the process of mulching, which is carried out. Okay, I hope that is understood. Right now, after this, we'll come to the portion of agriculture. Grazing means, oh, okay. Grazing refers to when you have, so for example, when you have the herbivores, when they eat the grass, right? That is grazing. I am sure you would have seen what is it that you call it? You would also refer to it by some name. What is it that you call it when you have the cows and the buffaloes when they eat the grass around, when they go for the pasture lands? So what is it that you guys call it? Generally we refer to it as the process of grazing, but I'm very interested to know, because I'm sure you would have experienced this and you would be calling it by some other name. So do let me know. Okay. No, Ankit, you are free to follow today's class. That is very different. Okay. Now we come to the portion of agriculture, significantly relevant both for your in Kannada it is Dana Maisu. Okay. So see, that is how we exchange information and knowledge. Okay. Let me know if you call it by an alternate name in English also, but I don't think so. So, uh, Malayalam it is Mayuka. Okay, good. Any other regional names? Afsana, write to us at IS Live at Byju's. Mentorship number will be provided to you. They will help you connect to the mentor as well. Don't worry. In Marathi, it is Charane. Very similar to that of Hindi as well. Okay, good. See, when people from different background they come together, that is how we move forward. In Hindi, it is Charna. Yes. Malayalam, one of you are saying it is Mayuka, one of you are saying it is Mayal. So see, as a person who doesn't know Malayalam, that is not very comforting for me, but nonetheless, it is around the same thing. But nonetheless, coming back to it, agriculture is becoming very, very relevant for the examination nowadays. In mains examination, it is asked in GS paper 3. In prelims, you get questions frequently being asked from here. So here, what is relevant for your prelims portion? If you consider that, so cropping pattern, then types of crops, conditions required, I will show you the type of questions also which have been asked from this area. Types of irrigation, organic farming, okay? These are the areas from which you will find questions to be asked in prelims. In the mains examination, you do have questions coming from the portions of here, cropping pattern, agricultural practices, then green revolution. Earlier benefits used to be asked, but now generally learnings and drawbacks are asked. And drawbacks. Then after that, organic farming. Under organic farming, even areas such as zero budget natural farming, that also becomes relevant. So all these are the areas, and in this question is asked in GS paper 3. You also have question around the issues in agriculture, sustainability of agriculture. Now, sustainability of agriculture, basically, the concept is very simple. Grow only those kind of crops in a region what is suitable in that area, only that kind, right? So, for example, in Punjab, it is in Western UP, the rainfall is so low, it is advisable to grow dry kind of crops or crops which don't require that much amount of water. But what are the crops grown there? Sugarcane, rice, which requires heavy amount of water. So that is unsustainable. It will either create the saline soil or it will either deplete the groundwater of that area. So that is something that you will observe. That is something that you will come across. So that sustainability of agriculture is a question. Then other than that, you also have, for example, issues in agriculture which are asked. What are the various issues which are faced? Now, in the case of issues faced in agricultural sector, please understand there are issues faced on the economic side as well, on the geographical side as well. Economic side, for example, the problem with the announcement of FRP, fair remunerative price, in the case of sugarcane, the entire MSP regime, which is announced by CSCP and Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. So all those portions, the agricultural policies, the lack of agricultural reforms, so as to say, so these will form the economic side of it, right? EPIDA, then the minimum support price, all these, they will come under the economy. So that also you have to consider. And when finally you are bringing out the answer, it should have the amalgamation of even the points from the economics and even the portions from geography. Okay. This year, 4 to 5 questions have been asked in mains. Yes, true. See, increasingly agriculture is becoming relevant in the examination. Increasingly, more and more questions are being asked from this topic. So that is a trend that will grow. Why it is being asked? It is not as if UPSC has suddenly woken up out of a deep slumber. It is purely driven from the fact that still around 50% of our population, directly more than 50%, is directly or indirectly indulged in agricultural sector. And we know that in agricultural sector, the incomes have been falling for a long time now. So that is why their problem is a major problem. So that is why you have to consider the questions associated in that area. Okay, right. So now we continue the portion of agriculture where, first of all, and here also please keep in mind the latest developments in tech. Agriculture, irrigation, etc. Okay. Now, the current affairs portion of it, from there also many questions are asked. And in this area, Down to Earth magazine will be very rewarding for you if you follow it up regularly. Any of us who is following this magazine up till now? This is a magazine that you can absolutely follow. Very good. Please follow it up for the rest of you. Down to Earth is a magazine which is very, very helpful for you. And please understand, you have to diversify your sources as well. UPSC is no longer that examination which used to be asked in the 90s, where you ratify a book, the better you rote learn, the better you will be in the examination. You have to diversify. Accumulated knowledge is something that UPSC is banking upon. What is it that you have experienced in your life? That is something that UPSC is banking upon. Even for that matter, in interview, even in interview, UPSC nowadays, you will find for the past 7 to 8 years, UPSC will ask your opinion on issues about your surroundings. It is no longer that interview process where, who is the president of Kazakhstan, what is the problem happening in Kazakhstan. No, it is more personal in that aspect. So that is why your accumulated sense of information that you have gained over a period of time, where these magazines will come to help. Okay. Sridevi YouTube channel is even better for down to earth. That will give you some amount of information in a visual manner, many of the examples also. But still, I would suggest to you, go through the edition of the magazine. Sometimes it gives out important facts and figures, which you can note it down. Or even from the YouTube videos, if you note it down, fair enough, but ensure that you are able to recall it, recollect it at the time of exam. Okay. So now we come to the portion of agriculture. Now in India, we have to understand that historically, or think about the childhood essays that you would have written for India, for your country. You had one of these as the famous topics or the favorite topics for the teachers in the young days. In fourth, fifth, or sixth standard, they would simply give you a homework or in exam also, that write an essay about my country, India. Now, if you recall, most of the essays, most of the articles would begin with the same kind of a sentence, that India is an agrarian country. That means India is a country where agriculture is the mainstay. And agriculture has been the mainstay not today, not yesterday, not since the 80s or the 70s. Agriculture has been the mainstay in this region for thousands of years, many thousands of years or so. You have evidences of crops such as millets, rice, etc., which can be found to be present even during the Harappan Valley civilization. So, next time that you read the portion of ancient history, pay attention there. Now, India has remained agrarian economy for a long time, where people earlier would grow crops for their own fulfillment. In the sense, it would be sustenance based farming. Sustenance is what? You grow crops so that you can eat. Whatever you grow, you eat, you save something so that you can grow it next season. But generally or chiefly, the purpose of growing crops is for your own consumption. So that was the pattern. But then the British rule happened. And even though it is a different matter that for all the topics we like to put the blame on the British, but here the blame does lie squarely on the British. Because when the Britishers came in, they started introducing the concept of cash crops, that you grow certain crops which you cannot consume, but you sell it into the market, you gain some money, and then from that money you buy a product and you consume. For example, cotton. Now you don't grow cotton so that I will eat cotton. No, you sell it in the market so that you get some money. From that money you will buy rice and wheat, and that is something that you will consume. Also, that was one of the reasons why many of the farmers, they shifted away from cultivation of food crops into cash crop regime. That is where all the indigo revolt, and you had the Tibhaga system, etc., all of that came into existence. Now, here, that also brought about farm crisis, in the sense that if you are growing cash crops, let's suppose the crops fail due to unseasonal rainfall, due to dry condition. Let's suppose the crops fail. Now you don't have money to even buy rice or wheat. So where do you go? You go to the money lenders. And the money lenders, they will give you money at a very high rate. And in order to pay that amount of loan, you will have to take loan somewhere else. So many of the farmers would get stuck into that debt trap, where sadly, in many of the cases, it would end up in farm suicides. So that is something which was very consistent and common. After India became independent, we were woefully short of food supply. Food was not present in significant amount. Average life expectancy of independent India was only around 27 to 32 years. That is how less a time period an adult individual was supposed to survive on an average. That was your life expectancy. And you had various different famines which had occurred in the time of the British rule, due to which lakhs of people, they died, they lost their lives due to starvation. In fact, the Bengal famine in 1940s itself managed to claim lives of more than around 40 lakh people. Think about it. Where your policies, they bring about a situation where more than 40 lakh people die immediately. Something of that sort, if it would have happened in the Western world, they would have made an entire thing out of it. But in India, not many people are aware about the crisis of the Bengal famine. But nonetheless, that happened. So independent India had short supply of food. So what would it do? It would look to the West. And immediately after the Second World War, United States already was implementing the Marshall Plan for Europe, and many of the third world countries or underdeveloped nations, they sought availability of food. So that is when the United States government, basically in their Congress, they brought about Public Law 480, a legislation which was named as Public Law 480, which is also many of the times infamously in India, you will have the older generation recalling it as the PL 480. Now, this was a law which was passed in US Congress. Under this law, grains of wheat, rice, corn, maize, etc., would be supplied to underdeveloped nations free of charge as a grant, as an aid. Now, countries such as Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, these were the countries which would benefit from that aid. And you had these making newspaper headlines. Another batch of wheat carrying ship enters India, enters Indian waters, or has docked across the coastline of India. And that would bring about significant amount of jubilation amongst Indians that now we will have sufficient availability of food. That was the level of scarcity. That is why, in many of the cases as well, in many of the issues of international policy and relevance as well, at that point of time, India had to forcefully follow the US line of action because India was dependent on US for food. That is the background that we are coming from. Then came the advent of Green Revolution. Then came the growth of crops due to Green Revolution in areas of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, etc. And that methodology was adopted across the country. By the late 60s, by the mid 70s, the results had started to show up. And that is when, by the late 70s and the 80s, India had become self sufficient in the food production. Now we were not dependent on food aid anymore. Now we were becoming truly independent in source of food supply. Slowly and steadily, the food supply increased. If you take a look at it now, for majority of the food grains and the food items and the farm products, India is either the largest or amongst the largest producers across the world. If you talk about it, in 1950s and 60s, per capita milk availability was so very low. You had multiple such so-called the forward-looking Western newspapers, right, such as New York Times, Washington Post, etc. They would publish multiple articles that how India would be a failed country because it doesn't even have milk to feed its people. Now, we are amongst the largest suppliers of milk and milk products across the world. We are the second largest supplier of wheat, second largest supplier of rice, largest and second largest supplier, it keeps on changing in the case of sugar, largest supplier of pulses, one of the largest consumers and one of the largest producers of oil seeds, one of the largest producers of cotton. So, across the various sectors, our agricultural footprint has not only increased, it has conquered and captured the world and its imagination. So, yes, indeed, we have come a long way. Yes, indeed. It is a journey that we have to be proud of as Indians, of what we have achieved. But still, at the end of it, if you analyze the situation today, are we where or have we reached the position that we deserve to be? Obviously not. There is still a lot which needs to be achieved. If you analyze it for today, still farm income is not to the level where it should be. Still, you do have farm suicides. Still, you have more than 50% of the population contributing only 15% to the GDP. So that means there is inefficiency. That means there is a scope for improvement. And that is why this topic becomes important for your examination. Okay? Now, here, if you observe it, more than 50% of the population is involved in agriculture directly or indirectly, where the gross value addition from agricultural sector alone is to the tune of $270 billion. Right? I always use this analogy to think about it, that where we are coming from. Pakistan and India, we both were dependent on the US aid for the grain supply, the PL 480 program. And even now, if you take a look at the headlines of the 1950s newspaper, they will talk about this fact only, right? So overall, $270 billion, right? So think about it. Both of these countries, they were dependent on US supply. Pakistan still is dependent on supply of food grains from the foreign countries. Now, we are no longer dependent on the supply, we are supplying to the world. When India basically recorded lower wheat production last year, and it brought to a stop or brought to a halt any export of wheat, a wheat export ban when it was imposed, global prices significantly skyrocketed because the supply from India was distorted. Not only are we the key members of the global supply chain, we are the drivers of the supply. So, after all these years, while the size of the entirety of Pakistan economy is close to around 200 to $250 billion, our agricultural sector alone adds to $70 billion to our economic setup. So, yes, indeed, we have come a long way. Exports from the agricultural sector, they turn out to be close to around $50 billion every year. It is increasing year after year. And India is expected to have produced around 316 million tons of food grains in the year 2021-22, which is expected to have been increased to roughly around 323 million tons in 2022-23. But then again, these are the advanced estimates given by the government. Now, here, let us take a look, first of all, at the types of agriculture that is observed, that is followed. So, when we talk about the types of agriculture or cultivation which is carried out, primarily or broadly, they can be classified into primitive sustenance, primitive subsistence, intensive subsistence, and commercial. Subsistence is what? Subsistence basically is when you grow crops for your self consumption. Growing crops for self consumption. That is subsistence farming. And then primitive. Primitive means what? Rudimentary. Very primitive in terms of no modern technological inputs, etc., in play. Something which is very, very rudimentary in nature. So, traditional. Rudimentary. Okay. So, here, for example, when you talk about the shifting cultivation or slash and burn cultivation, where what is done? For example, in hilly areas, in the regions where you have a lot of tribal population which is not well connected with the outside world, what do you do? So, if you have a farmland, or if you want to bring any area under cultivation which has been covered by trees or forests, what do? You simply cut those down, right? You cut those down. So, when you cut those down, you cut all of these down. So that is where the name slash comes from. And then after that, you burn off the rest. In order to clear the land, you will burn off the rest. And that is how you prepare the field. Now, in this, you don't make use of technology. It is the natural process. Water is provided by rainfall. As long as the soil is fertile, you will grow crop here. Once the soil becomes infertile, you bring another land or some other land under cultivation. So shifting cultivation. So here the output is never going to be very high. The produce is never going to be very high. So here the farmers, in many of the ways, they are forced to carry out hunting, gathering, beekeeping, etc., in order to augment fishing also, in order to augment their income and augment their food supply. So they indulge themselves in these activities. Okay, now intensive subsistence. Intensive means what? In case of intensive, you will observe that here, for example, the prime resource which is used is fertility of the land. And the fertility of the land is created by deposits. Okay, so the deposits and the depositions which are carried out by the various different rivers and the river valleys, in those areas you will have very fertile land, and using that fertility, many people will grow the crops in that region. Generally, you will find all the family members involved in that cultivation. Okay, every bit of that land is made use of, and again the production is largely for self sustenance. Some amount of excessive is sold off in the market, but largely for self sustenance. And then you have commercial farming. Commercial farming carried on a larger scale, very large scale, where basically you bring forward plantation cultivation, etc., where in a large area you grow only one kind of a crop. Profit is the only motive. Farming only purely for profit motive. Farming for profit motive. Okay, that is a feature that you find here. Now let us take a look at each one of them. Primitive subsistence. So it is practiced in small piece of land using rudimentary tools and techniques. Food produced is chiefly for self-consumption, hence the term subsistence. Mostly the modus operandi, that is the method of operation used, is shifting kind of cultivation, slash and burn as it is referred to. It is heavily dependent on natural resources. Okay, availability of rainfall for water presence, natural fertility and maintenance of soil. So only natural resources are relied upon chiefly. Now, shifting cultivation is a kind of primitive subsistence agriculture. And when we talk about shifting cultivation, not only carried over in India, but across the world, generally by the tribal community in large amounts, where they reclaim the forest lands, bring it under cultivation. They will utilize that land as long as the land is fertile. As soon as the land becomes infertile, immediately they will switch over to some other area. That is shifting. Okay, that is why it is shifting cultivation carried out across the region of Latin America, Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia also. It is carried out. Okay, so here jhum cultivation or slash and burn agriculture, it is migratory primitive agriculture. Land is cleared with traditional tools and cultivated for a few years. As soon as the fertility declines, land is abandoned in the favor of another freshly cleared patch of land. Cereals and tubers are generally grown. Hunting, gathering, fishing, and bird rearing is carried out as an occupation in order to augment your income, in order to also provide you with some amount of source of food, nourishment in many of the cases. It is to be observed in Latin America, tropical Africa, tropical regions of South and Southeast Asia. In all these areas, you do observe this shifting cultivation to be carried out. Okay. Then you have intensive subsistence farming. Is bulls are still used in primitive farming for plowing? Yes. Bulls are still used even in intensive cultivation in many of the areas. Intensive subsistence also in many of the areas you will find the usage of bulls. Okay. So intensive subsistence farming generally driven by the fertility of the land. Okay. So driven by fertility of land. In India, where do we perform shifting in many parts of northeastern India? In certain areas of Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh. In many of these areas, you carry shifting cultivation. Okay. So here, river valleys in and deltaic plains of South and Southeast Asia. Here you have small farms due to high population density. So the size of the farmland is small. When the size of the farmland is small, obviously you have a limitation in terms of the machineries that you can deploy, the amount of equipments that you will deploy. So obviously the productivity and the output is also less. Small farms means productivity or output is very less. Okay. Now, dominance of food crops, especially rice, because in many of the areas it is carried out for self consumption as a process. High intensity of land use, every bit of land is sought to be used as. Generally, you will find that family labor is deployed. So in majority of the parts of the country, this is the kind of agriculture or cultivation which is carried out, where you will observe if you have 5 members or 10 members in the family, all of them, they play some or the other role in ensuring cultivation is carried out. It is labor intensive, lot of labor utility. Traditional methods like crop rotation, mixed cropping, etc. is carried out in order to maintain soil fertility. And there is very low level of commercialization due to small output, due to small surplus. Surplus generated is very less. That is why almost negligible amount of commercialization. Then we come to commercial farming. Commercial farming, purely for profit. And when you carry out agriculture purely for profit, so what do? You bring a large land area under cultivation, a very large land area. Okay, you plant crops in that large land area. And then after that, you tend to grow only the single type of crop or the same type of crop in that entire region, so that you can sell in large volumes and make more money. But here, the initial cost will be very high. In order to initiate the cultivation, the cost involved is very high. So that is why the farmers, they basically, or the plantation owners, they basically try to ensure that the labor cost is less. That is why availability of cheap labor is a must in these cases. So for example, you would have come across many large farmlands in Punjab, Haryana, where they grow crops purely for profit motive, or plantation crops that you observe in the regions. For example, if you consider the areas in Nilgiris or areas around Darjeeling, etc., the Assam, the tea estates, all of that are commercial farming. So single crop is grown on large land holding, what is also known as estate farming. It is very highly commercial in nature, profit motive, capital intensive. The initial investment is very high. Investment is very high. Okay. The amount of money that you invest is very high. It is labor intensive as well. You require a deployment of a large labor force also. Processing infrastructure is also generally maintained within the farmland itself. Processing is as in you basically take care of the value addition of those particular crops, or for example the deseeding in as it is required in certain plants, etc. Whatever is required to treat those crops after harvesting, it is done on the farmland itself. So tropical and equatorial regions across Asia, Africa, Latin America, there you will find this commercial farming to be carried on. Having said that, in regions such as Western Europe, America, Australia, some parts of India, very rarely, but majorly in these areas, where the land size is very, very large, there you carry out commercial livestock and grain farming, where at the same time you ensure that the crop cultivation also takes place, and you also ensure that animal rearing also takes place. Okay, so this is what is also referred to as mixed farming. Mixed farming. That is crop cultivation plus animal rearing or animal husbandry. Okay, so to be found in humid temperate areas like northwestern Europe, eastern North America, parts of USSR, erstwhile USSR, that is nowadays in the region of Central Asia, parts of Ukraine. Now Ukraine doesn't carry out agriculture for a long period, for almost a couple of years now, but earlier Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, in these regions you observe this. Equal emphasis is laid on crop cultivation as well as animal husbandry, and crops such as wheat, barley, rye, oats, fodder, all of them are grown. Okay, so here basically, how many of us are not aware about USSR? Have no clue what USSR actually stands for? Okay, rather than getting confused, just think about it. The see USSR. Okay, I won't go into it, into the area of IR. Soviet Socialist Republic of Russia is what it would stand for. Present day Russia. Regions of Russia, Ukraine, Central Asia, etc. Is that understood now, Afsana? I hope that is understood. Intensive utility or use of land also, high level of modernization and commercialization, because here you will find active use of technology. Even in normal commercial farming also, technology is heavily deployed, right? Active use of technology is to be ensured here. High capital expenditure on agrochemicals, farm machineries, etc. Only then will you ensure or will you observe that surplus production. Okay. Yes, Ankit, that is correct. So these are your types of agriculture, types of cultivation which are carried out. And then we talk about cropping pattern. What do we mean by cropping pattern? So we'll take a look at it after a break. So we take a short break and 10 minutes break, and then we'll come back and we will continue. A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available. Thank you. Gaurav, difference between primitive and intensive. Generally, primitive is much more rudimentary in its approach, and in primitive, you will observe, in intensive, you will observe that still a slightly larger amount of production is ensured, and in intensive, it is lot more amount of labor is deployed, right? And generally carried out in areas where the land is very fertile. But that is not the case with primitive. Primitive in hilly regions mostly is where you will find regions which are not very well connected in terms of infrastructure and so on. Okay. Now we come to the cropping pattern in India. So when we say cropping pattern, what does that indicate? That basically indicates how do you plant the crops in a region. So cropping pattern broadly can be divided into two parts. One is what is referred to as monocropping. Monocropping. And then you have what is referred to as multi-cropping. Now, the name in itself is self-explanatory in the terms that when you talk about, let's suppose, monocropping, it tells you that the same kind of crop is being, or only one crop is being grown in that region. Only one crop is allowed to grow. And once that crop is harvested, either again you grow the same crop, or maybe you leave the land fallow for the rest of the year. So only one crop is grown. Type is grown or cultivated in the farmland. Okay. Then we have multi-cropping, where you grow multiple crops in the farmland in one cropping season or in one year. So in this, multiple crops are grown in the same farmland over an year. Now, how they are grown? Multiple crops, how do you grow it in the same farmland in a year? So, based upon that parameter also, you have further classification of multi-cropping into, you have sequence cropping, intercropping, and then you have mixed cropping. So, starting with intercropping. Intercropping, mixed cropping, and then sequence cropping. Okay. Now, in all these, basically it is a kind or it is a type in which you are able to grow multiple crops in the same farmland over a period of an year. So intercropping, what is intercropping? So in the case of intercropping, what you do is you basically ensure that in the farmland, let's suppose this is your farmland. So in the farmland, you grow the crops in definite fixed row pattern. For example, you grow rice, then let's say along with that, you have grown a vegetable. Again, rice, again, let's suppose that same vegetable, right? So multiple crops are grown in the set and the decided pattern. That is intercropping, where You can have here growth of rice, for example. You can have vegetables like potatoes, for example, chilies, etc. Then again, let's suppose rice. Then again, some other crop, right? Or maybe veg or chilies, anything, etc. Again, rice. So, in a definite row pattern, crops grown in a definite row pattern. Then you have mixed cropping. In mixed cropping, you don't observe that set pattern of row arrangement. In mixed cropping, for example, let's suppose you have to grow rice, coriander, chilies, etc. So in mixed cropping, what you do, for example, let's say here you have grown rice in this area. Let's suppose. In this area, let's suppose you have grown certain vegetables such as chilies. For example, in other area, you have grown certain vegetables. In other area, you have grown something else. So you are not following any fixed row pattern or arrangement. It is being grown randomly. So you have mixed pattern of growth. It is mixed pattern of growth which is observed. So here also, in 1 year, you manage to grow multiple crops in the same field. Okay, so mixed pattern of growth. Multiple crops you grow in the same farmland, but then over a span of year, and that you which you grow, you spread it over in different parts of the field. And then you have sequence cropping. In sequence cropping, what do? In the case of sequence, you follow a particular arrangement that after, let's suppose, rice, I will grow wheat, then again, maybe I will grow cucumber or a watermelon, then again rice, then again wheat, again maybe cucumber, and that sequence follows. So, for example, rice followed by wheat, followed by, let's suppose, cucumber, followed again by rice. So, in this also, in 1 year, you are growing multiple different crops, but you are not growing them at the same time. You are growing it in a kind of a sequence. So, that is your multi-cropping. So, this is the classification of cropping pattern into monocropping and multi-cropping. Multi-cropping further divided into intercropping if the crops are grown in a definite row pattern, in a definite arrangement, that is your intercropping. If they are grown mixed together randomly, that is mixed cropping. And if they are grown in a kind of a sequence, in a kind of a cycle, that is your sequence cropping. So that is why overall, these are your various cropping patterns. Monocropping or monoculture refers to growing of only one crop on a piece of land year after year. So in a way, not only does this lead to the draining of the soil fertility, but the soil or the farmland is also to be left barren for a considerable period of time. After the harvesting, the soil is left barren for a considerable period of time. Then multiple cropping, growing two or more crops on the same piece of land in one calendar year, that is known as multiple cropping. That multiple cropping is subdivided into intercropping, mixed cropping, as well as sequence cropping. Intercropping, here two or more crops are grown simultaneously with a definite row pattern, definite row arrangement. Mixed cropping, where you grow two or more simultaneously intermingled without any row pattern. Okay, intermingled, you grow it. Then sequence cropping. So here, growing two or more crops in a sequence on the same piece of land in a definite order. So after Kharif, Rabi, and so on, you grow it up. So mixed cropping also is also going to enhance fertility of soil by growing pulses, etc. Yes. Mixed cropping can enhance the fertility of the soil. Yes. So you can go for growing leguminous plants, etc. Is the audio available? Audio seems to be working fine, isn't it? Yes. So Madhuri, kindly check your connection, please, in that case, because the rest of them are saying that the audio is working just fine. So now we come to the portion of cropping seasons. Now in India, we experience different cropping seasons in the sense that what are the conditions, the climatic conditions, etc., temperature, moisture conditions, etc., in which you grow certain crops. So accordingly, the cropping seasons in India, they are divided into Rabi season, Kharif season, and the Zayed season. When we talk about the Rabi crops, these are also what are referred to as the winter crops. Winter crops. These are basically sown in November, December, harvested in March, April. Example, wheat, mustard. Okay, these are your Rabi crops. Kharif crops. These are also what are known as monsoon crops. Immediately after the monsoonal rainfall is when these crops are planted. Monsoon crops. Sown in mostly end June, July, and some parts early August as well. So mostly sown in between June, July, harvested in September, October. Okay. And then you have Zayed, which is also known as the summer crop. These have a very short growing season. Very short growing period. So, for example, here you'll find that it is sown in, for example, in the month of April and May, harvested in June. Example of these kharif crops: rice, cotton, etc. Okay. Example of the summer Zayed crops: cucumber, muskmelon, watermelon, etc. So these are when the crops are planted. Now please understand, for example, when we talk about the month of December, while the month of December will experience the Rabi season or the Rabi conditions where you will grow wheat and mustard and pulses, etc., in the northwestern part of the country, around Punjab, Haryana, etc., it will be winter. So winter crops will be grown, but simultaneously in the month of December, there is going to be a higher temperature and high amount of rainfall being experienced in the region around Coromandel coastline. So you will have rice cultivation there. So, because of the regional diversity of the country, the climatic diversity, the conditional diversity in various parts of the country, it is not as if that you go for a uniform cropping season. You experience a variety of them. Okay, so that is something that you will find as a common characteristic. So these are few of the important crops that you find. So barley, wheat, peas, mustard, all of these are basically your rabi crops. Then paddy, maize, jowar, cotton, tur, groundnut, soybean. These are your kharif crops. Watermelon, muskmelon, cucumber. These are your zaid crops. Okay, so these are your major crops that are grown. We'll take a look at few of them. We'll try to understand the conditions that are required for their growth and also the regions where you grow them. For example, starting with rice. Now, rice generally grows in areas where you have, it is a tropical crop. So, rice generally will grow in areas where you have a higher average annual temperature in the excess of around 25-24 degrees Celsius. That is where rice will ideally grow. And also where the rainfall is very high. Generally, the amount of rainfall required is roughly around 120 to 140 centimeter. In that much amount of rainfall, rice will grow ideally. But the minimum amount of rainfall required for the crop of rice is around 100 centimeter. That is the minimum amount of rainfall required. Now, ideally, the areas having this much high amount of rainfall, that is the southern and the eastern part of the country, those are the areas which have very high amount of rainfall, isn't it? But then, when we talk about the western part of the country, northwestern part of the country, there also nowadays rice is being grown because of availability of irrigation. Now, in those areas, you have the problem of surplus irrigation, you have the problem of scarcity of water, depletion of groundwater reserves, etc. So, those are your minor growing areas. But across the eastern part of the country, for example, Brahmaputra Plains, for example, the region of West Bengal coastline, Odisha coastline, even Tamil Nadu coastline for that matter, availability of moisture is significantly present in the coastal areas so as to ensure that throughout the year you grow different varieties of rice. Right? You have varieties of rice which you sow in the month of June. You will be ready to harvest that in the month of August. You have a variety of rice that you sow it up in the month of late July or August. You harvest it in the month of October. You also have a variety of rice that you sow in the month of December and you will be able to harvest it in the month of February, March. Right? So in these areas, you come across various different varieties of rice. So for example, here in Assam, West Bengal and Odisha, three crops of rice are grown throughout the year. For example, Os, Aman, Boro. So all these are, when the conditions are prevalent throughout the year, why can't you grow rice throughout the year? So in the eastern and the southern part of the country, because the rainfall is very high, the temperature is also higher. That is why you grow this crop through the year. This is the reason why in all these areas you don't come across the event of stubble burning. Why? Because following that crop of or following the harvesting of the rice, you leave the land for some time, the stubble automatically softens, and then you plant rice again. Or rainfall happens over a period of time, that can also soften the stubble. But then, when you talk about, let's suppose, the regions in Punjab and Haryana, now in that area, rice has been harvested, right? The rice which has been sown in the month of July, August has been harvested now, and the stubble is remaining. You have to ready the land to cultivate wheat there. So, what do? You basically burn the stubble and create that pollution. Having said that, overall, if you take a look at it, these are your major rice growing areas of the country across the eastern end and also the foothills of Himalayas, also the Malabar coastline, some parts of Konkan coastline. Rainfall is very high through the year. So moisture sufficiency is maintained. But because of irrigation, in other areas also, rice is being grown. Think about it, when you grow rice, the amount of water consumed is so very high. For example, 1 kg of rice, in order to grow 1 kg of rice, you are required to provide close to around 5,000 liters of water. So if that water is not received by rainfall, it absolutely makes no sense why you should deplete your groundwater reserves in order to grow that rice, which anyways will go to the surplus area or the buffer zone. When you, let's suppose, export that rice, there also, for export, rice export also, I hope you are aware that in the past few years, as has been the case, the MSP, the minimum support price provided by the government to the farmers when they buy the rice from the farmers, the MSP is so high that the international prices are lower than that. So think about it, presume it, that government buys it from the farmers at around 1800 rupees per quintal. It wants to export it, but international prices are at 1100 rupees per quintal. So if the government exports that, it will incur heavy losses. That is why it keeps on adding on to the surplus reserves. It is a different matter altogether that for the past few years, ever since the time of the COVID pandemic, since you had the supply of free food grains which are provided to a large section of population, much of that buffer reserve is being utilized now. India is the second largest producer of rice after China, and the total rice production in 2022 to 23, as per the advanced estimates, this can be liable to correction as well. This is only as per advanced estimates, is estimated to be around 135.54 metric tons. Right? That is the total estimated rice production, the advanced estimate of it. Now, then we come across the Rabi crop of wheat, which is a winter crop. Okay, so when we talk about wheat, here it requires a kind of a cool growing season and at the time of ripening, bright sunshine. At the time of sowing of that wheat, some amount of rainfall which is received is always beneficial. And when it is sown, November, December. So during that time, northwestern part of India receives rainfall due to which phenomena? What do you think? Very good. Western disturbances. So at the time of sowing, some amount of rainfall which is provided, that is always going to be beneficial. Okay. So here, at the time of sowing, some rains provided by western disturbances are beneficial. Okay. But the condition should be dry and sunny when the grain is going to ripen up. At that point of time, the condition has to be dry and sunny. So that is why when you receive unseasonal rainfalls during the month of March or April, again due to western disturbances itself, there is a lot of rice or lot of wheat crop which gets destroyed, right? What are referred to as the post harvest losses also. And many of the time the standing crops also get destroyed. So unseasonal rains, they are never beneficial, because wheat, when it is sold in the market, I hope you are aware, the price is given based upon the grain size and also the moisture content. If the moisture content of wheat grain is less, price given is more, it is a better one. Moist wheat grains, they don't fetch that price. So that is why lesser the amount of moisture content, better the wheat is. So that is why dry conditions. It requires 50 to 70, 75 centimeter of annual rainfall, something that you find in the region of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh naturally. So this is the condition naturally conducive in that area. There are two important wheat growing zones in the country, Ganga Satluj Plains and the black soil region of Deccan. There also, even in the Malwa region, there also you grow wheat. So these are your major wheat growing regions of the country. Overall, just think about it. When you observe the major areas and the minor areas where they are grown, An important trick or an easy trick to remember this is, in case you are familiar with different parts of the country, in case you are aware about the food habits of different parts of the country. So whatever is the staple diet of that region, staple diet is what you commonly or normally consume on a day-to-day basis, 3 meals a day. What is it that chiefly constitutes your meal? In the eastern and southern part of the country, rice dominates. In the northwestern part of the country, wheat and wheat products dominate. So that is why you will always find that the staple food is always going to be the one which is naturally grown in that area and traditionally which grows in that area. That is why still many parts of the country, traditionally you will find they are millet consuming. Their millets have been grown traditionally for years altogether. Okay, so India is the second largest producer of wheat after China. According to the government, wheat output rose to around 112.74 million metric tons in 2023. However, in 2022, the growth of wheat or the production of wheat was lesser. It was estimated to be 110, right? And this was around a dip observed in comparison from 2021. Why? Because in 2022 you had substantial amount of wheat crop which was destroyed because of significant heat wave which persisted across. So that is why a lot of wheat crop was also destroyed in the process. Okay, now then we come to millets. So millets have been grown in the subcontinent for more than 3000 years now. Millets, they are also referred to as nutri cereals because of the nutrients that they provide, and also they are referred to as farmer's friend, in the sense poor farmer's friend, in the sense that this is not a crop which has a lot of tantrums like rice and wheat, that this condition is required, that much rainfall is required, rainfall is not required, etc. Any condition you grow it, soil not very fertile, doesn't matter, not much of irrigation, doesn't matter, any condition you grow it, it will grow. Okay, it doesn't require irrigational facilities, etc. Natural amount of rainfall would be sufficient. And here, once they are produced, not only they are very nutritious for intake, because they provide you with calcium, iron, fibers, vitamins, etc. At the same time, they can also be used, their byproducts can also be used for fodder for the animals. So it is beneficial both for humans as well as for fodder for animals, that is for mixed farming. Okay, so jowar, bajra and ragi, they are the important millets grown in India. Though these are known as coarse grains, they are of high nutritious value. And jowar is an important food crop with respect to an area and production. It is a rain-fed crop. Rain-fed crop means that rainfall is sufficient. It is not dependent on irrigation. Okay, hardly needs irrigation. Can grow in under conditions of natural rainfall. Okay. Now, jowar producing states Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, some portions of Rajasthan also, you will find jowar being grown. Overall, if you take a look at the overall conditions, so it requires a higher temperature of 25 to 32 degrees Celsius. All the millets, they thrive under these conditions. Okay, and rains around 40 to 60 centimeters. So this is the condition that you find in majority of the parts of the country. But majority of the parts of the country, they don't grow this in very large quantity. The quantity generated is generally lesser. Okay, so here this is also what is referred to as sorghum. Sorghum or jowar. Okay, millets also grown in Haryana. Yes, it is grown, but in not large quantities. See, ideally, for that matter, Tea is grown in Andhra Pradesh also. But will you consider Andhra Pradesh as a tea producing state? No. Ideally, millets have been grown in Haryana for thousands of years. And millet should be grown in Haryana for next thousand of years because that is the condition conducive. But in the meanwhile, for the past few decades, Haryana has basically started growing rice so much that soil has become so poor in terms of its fertility. Groundwater has depleted to such an extent. That is why, in many of the cases, the farmers are reverting back to the growing of millets. But it has still not taken such a large overall adoption. Having said that, because of climate change, the rainfall is not happening frequently, etc. Because of those factors, here you will observe that in the present condition, with the rains falling, failing, you have large conditions of dry situation. Farm income is not significantly improving, and majority of the section of the population is suffering from one or the other form of malnutrition or malnourishment. That is why the government has been pushing forward millet consumption and millet production across the country. That is why the International Year of Millets is being celebrated this year, and 2023 is the International Year of Millets. That is the reason why you had very easy expected question about millets being asked both for optional of geography as well as for your general studies portion of geography. Okay, now, right. Now we have bajra. Bajra, which is also referred to as pearl millet. Now it is a coarse grain crop and it is considered to be poor man's staple nourishment suitable to cultivate even in dry lands that there whereby it can grow with normal rainfall itself, no separate irrigation. Bajra requires low annual rainfall between 40 to 60 centimeter. Here also observe 40 to 60 centimeter. Here also 40 to 60 centimeter. Temperature range of 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. Here also 25 to 30. So high rainfall, high temperature range, low rainfall, the conditions which are prevalent in many parts of the country. So that is why major bajra producing states Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka is catching up also, but in Karnataka majorly ragi is produced in chief. Bajra can also be used as a valuable animal for it is referred to as pearl millet. So this is what the crop of bajra looks like. I have attached images because many of the times we hear about millets but we are not able to associate it with it, that what do these millets look like, etc. So that is what your pearl millet is. Then you have ragi, which is referred to as finger millets. This is what ragi appears to look like, and this will grow in almost all the soil conditions. Even when the soil profile is not very well developed, even in shallow soil of the hilly areas also, you will find the growth or the development of ragi. So ragi is a crop of dry regions and grows well on red, black, sandy, loamy and shallow black soils, right? It is rich in iron, calcium and other micronutrients and fiber or roughage as well. Major rice producing states Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and hilly regions of Sikkim, Jharkhand, Arunachal Pradesh, there also you will observe this. But Karnataka is amongst the leading producers of ragi. Karnataka, for that matter, for a considerable period of time, Karnataka has also been marketing ragi products. So, thereby increasing the consumption. Understand, you need to diversify your products. You need to diversify the products that you can generate. So, value addition, if you carry it out, obviously the amount of income that you can earn will be very significant. That is why one of the major issues that is plaguing Indian agriculture is that we lack value addition. We don't add value to the crops, right? If you add value to the crops, if the farmers themselves are able to add value to the crops, they will be paid or they will earn handsomely out of that. Okay, so this is your ragi. Then comes maize. Now maize, think about it, is a crop which can again be used both as food and fodder for the animals. US is the largest supply. Now we were talking about the value addition. US is the largest supplier of maize. accounts for close to around 25% of the global maize production that is carried out in US itself. It has got a separate corn belt of its own. But when we talk about US, here the farmers get their money because they keep on adding value to it. They make multiple products out of maize, be it starch, be it artificial sweeteners, be it alcoholic beverages, be it various different chemicals. Uh, then you have even paper pulp manufacturing is done, fiber making is done. Multiple products are made from maize. So when you have multiple diversified products that you make out of one of the crop, obviously its demand will increase, and then the farmers will be paid accordingly. Okay, so it is a kharif crop which requires temperature of 21 to 27 degrees Celsius. But in certain areas, it is wherever the temperature is around 20, 21. It is grown in areas such as Bihar even during the Rabi season. Okay, grows well in the old alluvial Bangar soil is where it grows particularly well. Now, in addition, maize serves as the basic raw material for industrial products such as starch, oil, protein, alcoholic beverages, food sweeteners, pharmaceutical, packaging industry, and paper industries. In all these areas, maize as a crop is used. Sri Devi, yes, I have. I have seen that, consumed that, and in fact, the large ragi balls or the ragi mudde, as they are referred to, quite a delicacy to enjoy. So that is something which that is why Karnataka has been successful in marketing that as well, and that is a case study which already is being followed in many B schools as of now, about how you can improve the consumption of millet. When you appeal to the normal public appetite, when you appeal to them that okay, this is the benefit of it, these are the various different products in the cuisines that you can develop on it, then automatically the demand will increase. For example, what India did during the G20 presidency was basically it ended up finishing or furnishing different types of condiments made out of the millets. So that is how you promote them. Right. Now, we talk about pulses. Now, pulses are again rain fed crops in many of the areas. This can also grow in Bangar soil. Right. So here, when you talk about the pulses, India is not only amongst the largest producers, but also amongst the largest consumer of pulses across the world. Right. So India is the largest producer as well as a consumer of the pulses, accounting for 1/4 of the total production of pulses. You have wide variety of pulses being grown. So, for example, you have tur, urad, moong, masoor, peas, gram, different varieties of pulses are grown, right? Black gram, green gram, etc. Now, here it is grown in states such as Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, etc. Here, the exact production numbers, how much is being produced year after year, not required to be understood or learned. And here, pulses, because you have a wide variety of them, you don't have a generalized temperature or rainfall condition, but these are also in the category of rain-fed crops. Okay, can be grown in older alluvium also. Okay. Then another tropical crop, that is sugarcane. Sugarcane, which is primarily used for the production of sugar. Now, this is also one of the very significantly water intensive crops, requires high amount of water. 120, 140 centimeter rainfall, ideally those areas are where sugarcane grows. But minimum 100 centimeter or 75 centimeter to 100 centimeter, that much amount of rainfall is a must. Temperature conditions between 21 to 27 degrees Celsius, annual rainfall between 75 to 100 centimeter. India is the second largest producer of sugarcane, only after Brazil. Now, this ends up varying year after year. Sometimes India becomes the largest producer, sometimes Brazil becomes the largest producer. At least that is the trend going on for the past few years. Now, it is chiefly used for the production of sugar. Now, it has also got byproducts such as bagasse and molasses. Such as bagasse and molasses. Okay. Now, this bagasse and molasses, these are the byproducts which are left behind after the sugar is generated from sugarcane. And this can be used for biofuels, paper, fiber, pulp manufacturing, packaging material manufacturing, etc. Used for biofuels, paper manufacturing, ethanol production, etc. Now, major sugarcane producing states, they are Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar, Punjab, Haryana. Now, over a period of time, that is over almost a decade and a half now, 15 years to 20 years almost, there has been a trend which is being observed. And that is the sugarcane growing areas or the sugarcane producing centers, they are shifting from the regions of the north, that is Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab, Haryana, etc. From these areas, they are shifting to the regions of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, etc., Maharashtra, etc. Now, why is it that the entire sugarcane industry is shifting to the south? What is the reason for that? The reason is very simple. When you talk about the industries or the conditions for the growth of sugarcane requires higher amount of rainfall. Rainfall is very high in southern part of the country. Sugarcane requires a temperature of close to around 25 27 degrees. In northern part of India, that temperature window exists for around 6 to 8 months. In southern part of the country, that temperature exists for almost 10 months, 10 11 months. So the growing season is larger in southern part of the country. Because the growing season is larger, the sugar content which develops, the sucrose content which develops in the sugarcane that you grow in southern part of the country, that is also going to be higher. So the sugarcane produced in southern part of the country has got higher sucrose content also, better growing conditions available also. Infrastructure in general is better in the southern part of the country in terms of farm to market connectivity, or in terms of the road connectivity, availability of electricity, etc. That is much better in terms of southern parts of the country. Then also, when we talk about, for example, cooperatives, mill owners, etc., that organization is also well oiled in the southern part of the country as compared to north. That is why, in general, all the sugarcane producing centers and the entirety of the sugarcane industry in itself is shifting from north to southern part of the country. Okay? It is used in blending of petrol, yes. It's there in our field. Yes, it is. It is something that you will find increasingly. So, if you would have basically toured the southern part of the country 10 years back or 15 years back, you would not have found that many areas of sugarcane farming. But now, increasingly, the farmers are cultivating it because the conditions are prevalent. And that again comes as per the conditions of the traditional farming or sustainable farming, that grow the crops which can naturally be suited in that area. Okay, that will be beneficial. Now, then we come across some of the plantation crops. Okay, and then fiber crops also will take a look into. But okay, you have a snacks break coming up. Okay, break time. Yes. Okay, fair enough. Take a break, and We'll be back in half an hour. So take a break and be back in half an hour. 5:35. Sridevi, that is a very nice formulation. 75% of land for sugarcane and rest for vegetables. That is what even the agriculturalists are suggesting as of now. That grow a cash crop, along with that, grow horticultural crops, which will give you better remuneration. Okay, but we will carry this discussion forward after we come back from a break and at 5:35 p.m. and we will carry this forward. Is hydroponics suitable for these major crops? Not on a very large scale, no. On a smaller scale in urban environment, maybe yes. But when you are talking about million metric tons of production, not always. Okay. In some of the coastal areas or riverine areas, but you need to take care of many of the externalities. Horticultural crops give more value addition, yes.